Someone also said that they have difficulty eating in front of people. Now, this is really difficult because if you're having difficulty eating in front of people, I can understand that Christmas dinner will be extremely difficult for you. But as I've just said, you've got to try and do these sorts of challenges, and you've got to think about what makes you anxious about eating in front of people. Is it that you feel people are watching you? Because you know that if you are picking, I don't know, just vegetables, you know that people are going to end up watching you. So the first step in thinking about this is picking the right foods so that you haven't got a plate of food that looks foreign to other people. They're like, what is this? But if you pick something that is actually quite normal, people will think nothing of it. So that's the first step that you got to do, choosing the right thing. The next step, I suppose, is actually eating it. And if you do feel the sense of anxiety building and you are struggling, then you've just got to tell someone. And this can be someone that you can confide in. And hopefully you've been speaking to them before this period, and even perhaps brief them before Christmas dinner that you might feel a bit anxious, and is it okay that you can talk to them even if you have to walk outside the room. The other thing that can make things even more difficult is if you have these ritualized behaviors around food. And when I say ritualized, I mean things that you do that will seem extremely strange to other people. And it is not you doing it, it's the eating disorder making you do it because it relieves your anxiety. In a way, it's like an OCD kind of thing. So you've got to really try and act on these things before the Christmas period, because at these times you may only be eating with one or two people, you may be eating alone. And it's the times where you're eating alone where it can be more difficult to try and overcome, because you feel that no one else is looking at you, so what's the point? And things can get really difficult from there on in. So what you've got to do is the way that I did it. So you've got to think about all the things that you do that are so-called ritualized, and you have to be really honest with yourself, because if you're not honest with yourself, then this will fail. You've got to think about all the things that you do are ritualized. Write them down and act on each one in succession. Don't try and just throw all things out of the window immediately, because that will be too difficult for you. And what you've got to do is do the first thing on your list has to be the easiest thing. Maybe it's the thing that you've started doing the most recently, because that will be the easiest thing for you to try and stop doing. And as soon as you can prove to yourself that you can not perform this behaviour and it will result in the outcome that you are not actually anxious, or that you do not have this really bad thing that you think is going to happen to you, because this is what a lot of people say. They perform these things because there are things going in their mind that are so-called intrusive thoughts, intrusive ideas, things that will say that bad things will happen if you don't perform these things. But if you can prove to yourself through the act of not doing it that nothing bad will happen, then you can take a great deal of comfort. And then you go to the next thing on your list. Now, the reason why I say do the easiest thing first is because now that you've proved yourself on the easiest thing, the next thing will be a lot easier to try and overcome, because you've already proved to yourself that nothing bad will happen. And then you can move on down the list until you get to the end, really. And that's where I am now. I no longer have any ritualized behaviors around food, and I am eating relatively normally. The next thing that people struggle with is that they have these so-called compensatory behaviours, whereby after the meal they may feel the compulsion to exercise or to purge. And if you are struggling with these kinds of behaviours, as I've just said, the important thing is to try and overcome these before things like Christmas. And this will involve you having to go to therapy, having to do things in outpatients. You've got to really act on these things, because they won't go away on their own. And if you do just think that, things will only get worse from now on in. Because from my experience, what I've seen is that people have a behaviour and they do it after a meal. And if they say that things will just get better, then the next time they might just add something to that behaviour. And what you then have is this perpetuating problem whereby you're continually adding these compensatory behaviours to the point where it's completely taken over your life. So if you can act on it earlier, where there are fewer things for you to overcome, you'll find it a lot easier to do. If you're at the opposite end of the spectrum where you really do have so many issues, I really advise you to go and speak to a healthcare professional so that they can ease you through it, because it will be really difficult for you to do on your own. And even if you can go and find these anonymous support groups where they can support you through doing these things, that will be helpful. Because yeah, it will be too difficult for you to do on your own. The final part of Christmas is dessert, and the difference from Christmas from normal times of the year is that the food tends to be a lot more opulent, a lot more luxurious, and you might find it a bit more difficult to like understand what to do, even if you do have a meal plan in place. And if you are struggling, the first and obvious thing is to have the meal plan in place so that you can have a general guide. And if you are really struggling to know what a portion will look like, then I suppose one of the things that you could do is firstly look on the packet. It might say that a portion is a certain fraction of the cake of the Christmas pudding, and you know what you should be having then. Or perhaps you can look it up on the internet. If you are a bit further through your recovery and you are willing to have a bit more of a challenge for yourself, have a look at what the other people around you are having. I'm not saying have a look at the person in your family who just takes the biggest slice of the cake, because there is always that person in the family. But if you have certain members in the family that you know are sensible around food, and you know will pick something that will just be enough for them, then have a look at the portion that they're taking and just try and mimic it. You'll find it a lot easier to do if you do it this way. And I'm not saying compare yourself to others under all circumstances, but because a lot of the time you're comparing yourselves against unhealthy behaviours. But if you're comparing what you're doing to what someone is doing and it's normal, this is a lot more healthy, because you're just trying to understand what is normal and what you can do that will just be best for you, really. So I hope this has been useful for you. If you have any suggestions about things that I may have missed, please leave it in the comment section below as soon as possible, and I'll try and add it into the next video, because I know that this time of year there is so many things that can go through your mind, and I know it can be really stressful. So I know that I haven't touched on everything that there is to touch on, but I hope that I've sort of understood the broad categories of things that you've been suggesting to me. But yeah, for now, thanks for watching.